Okay. All right. So what is it? Visibility and clarity are Ethereum scaling solutions driven by data and visualization.
Yeah, it's not the catchiest title, I must
Oh,
admit.
okay. Ouch. Okay. People don't leave. No one's allowed to leave.
Okay. There we go. Hello, everyone. Good morning, and I appreciate that you're all out here after, maybe some Czech beers last night. So, 1 second. There. It's going through. Wait 1 second. We don't want that. So, yeah, welcome. And I'm Tobias from growthepie.xyz, and we're a data analytics platform. More details on that later on. And yeah, the title, Understanding the Importance of Visibility and Clarity on Ethereum Scaling Solutions, driven by data and visualization. So what does it essentially mean? We have a lot of layer 2s and layer 3s and other stuff coming up. And I think we're all a bit confused. Okay, look, what's coming up next and why are there so many layer 2s? And we're trying to bring clarity into that field. And that's why we built a platform for that. And of course, that's why we pull data and we show different charts, and we produce kind of knowledge pieces around that so that you actually understand, okay, what's going on in the Ethereum ecosystem. So a couple of words from my side. I'm a product designer by background, been innovation consulting trainer, motorsport lover, and like to travel. So I'm kind of traveling all these conferences usually. And I'm one of the co-founders of Grow the Pie, so doing design, business development, communications. And so basically, like, we started last year, actually, with our platform, and we got an Ethereum Foundation grant because Ethereum said, like, look, we have all these layer 2s, and we need more data, we need more clarity, actually, on exactly all these scaling solutions. So in the beginning, it was a layer 2 analytics platform. But then it was pretty quick that everyone said, like, okay, now we're developing layer 3s, right? Arbitrum Orbit, for example. And like others do like a different approach. So we said, like, look, okay, let's say scaling solutions in general, and we just focus on that because there's a couple of other data platforms out there. And we said, look, but mostly we probably stay in one ecosystem, and we need like a clear path towards this whole ecosystem and what's happening in there. Is there any idea, or do you have any idea how many layer 2s are out there right now? So let's say 55? Any others? 200? Okay, no? Well, we're right in between. So last time I checked on L2 Beat, it was basically 124 and growing. So there's many unknowns out there, right? Because that's basically just what the L2 Beat guys, and they're doing an awesome job, are tracking, are researching. And so there's 55 active projects according to them. There's 44 upcoming. There's a couple that already kind of are being shut down. So goodbye to Public Goods Network, for example, unfortunately. And we have on the right side many layer 3 projects already. So that means, of course, it's not getting easier for the users, right? And that's why I want to do a bit of a time travel, actually, in this talk, do a bit of an interactive session, and go back in time and actually look at some of the things that were happening in the past around, data, knowledge, and also how kind of end users have been adopted much more. So actually, this is like one of the topics of this talk. So. And for that, I actually want to go back to October 2022, who attended DEF CON in Bogota. 1, 2. So basically, you see a couple of quotes out there. So one of the biggest questions almost 1.5 years ago was, how do we onboard the next 1 billion people using Ethereum? That was 1.5 years ago, right? So I'm not sure if we already have the next 1 billion people already using this ecosystem. And there's a couple of reasons for that, right? One of the talks that actually kind of got got stuck in my mind was about language. So there was a linguist in Bogota, and he said, like, look, we're using language that normal people don't understand, right? Of course, like it's a very tech-driven environment. But you know, we're talking about, if you imagine you ask your grandma right now, is trust less a good thing? Is like permission less a good thing? Is, you know, everything that we're actually talking about is not very normally used in our daily language, right? So if we look at it from an end user point of view, we actually need to improve there. And there was already the talk around that. So then we have the next thing is like wallets. You know, we all know it's pretty difficult to navigate all the different wallets. There's like hundreds out there as well. So which one should you use? And then, of course, now we got layer 2s, and now you got funds on Arbitrum, and you want to use more Optimism because there's a specific app running on that. What do you do then? And so that's why, in general, there's the need to improve UX around the decentralized apps. And then, of course, there was this big talk around on-chain data. Why do we actually need it? And people say, look, we actually have no data on the actual end users because we're not in Web 2 anymore, right? We're not Facebook that can track everything and all the users. But actually now it's been improved, and we actually can use data also in a very kind of privatized way, let's say, so that also helps us to make informed decisions of where we as developers, as designers, as end users should be. And basically, so like after 1.5 years now, we're pretty much in the same area still. So how do we get out of here? How do we get out of this basement in a way? And for that, we're actually going further back in time, and let's ask ourselves for what happened in the Middle Ages, right? Any ideas, like anything? What happened? Like one thing that comes to your mind straight away in the Middle Ages. What's that? Printing. Yeah, getting very close. But what I wanted to get at is like the scholars that basically had the knowledge, right? There was monasteries, and all the books were in there, and there was huge walls. We all know the monasteries probably if you go around Europe. And so knowledge was basically constrained in these walls, right? And also like the people outside that didn't have the education to actually understand, okay, or they couldn't read. They couldn't read all the knowledge that has been out there already. And in China, basically the same thing. China has been like way ahead back in the day, right? Like Europe just reinvented stuff that China already had, but that was also very constrained. And I think a similar thing is happening in the crypto world right now, because I'm not saying that other developers can't read, but I'm saying that you know, also there we don't onboard the developers in the best way. So this is a report by Electric Capital from like a couple of months ago. And you see in all of crypto, and when you actually go to the page developerreport.com, you actually see that we only have around 7,000 active developers right now, full-time developers, right? And if you compare that to the rest of the industry, or like the rest of the world, basically the other industries, it's a very minimal amount. And you also saw right here on the right that the amount of active developers is actually going down, which is a pretty bad sign, let's say. And so that's why we need to do a lot as well to kind of onboard not just end users, but also more developers, right, in the right way. And then kind of let them make informed decisions to actually go further with their apps and with their developments. And now another thing, like going forward from the Middle Ages to 2007, idea what happened in 2007, 2006, 2007. Pretty huge shift actually for like some adoption. What's that? That was a bit later, but so basically there was the iPhone coming out, right? And the iPhone kind of started all that app development and that stuff. But still, you actually couldn't. The first iPhone, you couldn't install like third-party apps. So you couldn't actually, just go on an app store and kind of download something and, really kind of, I don't know, use Facebook or whatever. Apple basically constrained that in a very, very clear way. And people, or let's say hackers, then said, look, no, actually this device is so powerful, we can allow the users to actually install more apps, right before the actual App Store came out. And that was still pretty challenging, because who like was jailbreaking their iPhone? Here, just hands up quickly. Okay, 1, 2, 3, including me. So I did as well 4. So there's a couple of people, but of course you all knew that it's difficult, right? And it's you have to have some technical knowledge, and then you kind of downloaded some apps, and your screen looked like that, and so like Wi-Fi address, data IP address, and storage, and so on, like in a way that kind of looks similar to some of the decentralized apps we might have right now, right? So what I'm saying with this is we right now, of course, we have a good development, and we're developing in a good way in terms of apps, but it's still very a wall around this industry, right? We're not letting other people in, maybe in the best way on the developer side and on the end user side. And so basically, how now do we get out from this basement and discover the world? And some of the things that it's simple things that might make your project that you're developing more accessible. So of course, we need to use language and imagery that normal people really understand and value. So there's a couple of developments. I think, like if you, for example, use the Clave wallet and passcode right now, that's actually pretty simple, so you don't have to deal with private keys anymore, right? So which is a pretty good development already. Of course, we have to be careful because we still have the challenge of now you need to trust developers, right? Instead of kind of having like a centralized bank, let's say, that normal people trust right now still. Let's say in the developed world and developing world, it might look different. But now we shift the trust to the developer side, and how do we actually make sure as end users, okay, I can trust this developer, and there's actually the things happening, what they say that's happening, right? If you think about, for example, WorldCoin, if you get your iris scanned, I mean, what's happening between the camera and the rest? So it's a huge challenge. And then, of course, you can use data to find your target audience in a place where you should kind of operate and deploy, right? Because we saw there's 124 plus layer 2s, and the number is growing out there. So where should you as a developer be, right? Like just considering the Ethereum ecosystem. I mean, there's so many other ecosystems out there. We all know Solana is pushing a lot now, to get more end user adoption driven by VCs. So it's a huge challenge, but it's a doable one. And of course, designed for a real problem, a real target audience that you can often found, and not just ourselves, yourself, and so on. I mean, that's a pretty normal thing. And of course, pay attention to UX, UI to differentiate yourself. And not just a funny meme picture, because I mean, we all like it, and we know, look, we can use the latest DeFi app or yield farm that has a new animal in its name, or like an icon or whatever, or new meme coin. But of course, like thinking ahead and thinking, okay, well, how do we get other users on board that really trust different imageries? Like when you think about fintech, for example, also fintech in the beginning had a pretty bad image, or no one actually used them that much, because like going from like the big banks, HSBC, to like a fintech Revolut, for example, was pretty challenging. So, but they still had a better user experience actually. But it's also about the image around the brand, let's say, to get the normal people on board. And of course, also ask yourself the questions: have a thought about the whole user experience journey, and do I still keep walls around my own ecosystem, right? So, like, what is like who do I not yet address? And I think it's pretty important. If, for example, like the whole user journey experience, user experience journey. So when you kind of imagine you develop a nice app, but you haven't thought about the whole process. Like you think like, okay, look, I have that next fintech maybe, but how do people actually then onboard the funds, right? Without maybe like a very complicated wallet, without using MetaMask, for example. So people like usually what I'm seeing is that developers start later on, right? They say, look, we have this nice app that people can use it, but then actually forget about the steps before, about how to actually get people, like get their funds on like a certain layer 2 as well. So if you're deciding to deploy an Arbitrum right now, but your actual target audience might be more, let's say, public goods driven, for example, they might be more an optimism, might be more on the super chain. And then, of course, it's a challenge to actually get into the Arbitrum ecosystem, for example. And then, of course, also make data-driven decisions. So kind of really looking at the different layer 2s, looking at the data, looking at the usage data of the layer 2s, and really deciding, okay, what can I do? Where can I position myself as a project, as a developer much better? And and that just has benefits for you as a developer. So the likelihood that you actually fail in one ecosystem is reduced because you decided early on to go with a specific layer 2. That also kind of is actually the case for other let's say, blockchains that might be changing to become a layer 2. Like Celo is the best example. They've been a layer 1 for a long time, and they evaluated for quite some time around the values that they want to drive with their users, and to which stack should they now actually join. So they thought about, of course, optimism, they thought about Arbitrum, they thought about the Polygon CDK, but in the end, after kind of, I think, evaluating for like 4 months, 5 months, also from many different sides, they decided to go with the OP stack, so the super chain, because it just fits much better with their sustainable image and the public goods image. And if you have these like the data points around, I decided on my target group because of some data, because of some charts, you have a better better data to kind of also convince your investors that you made these data-driven decisions. And and of course, kind of you can differentiate yourself without the technical jargon. And so basically what we are trying to do with Grow the Pie is really that we provide some of this data as well for you, and that's why I prepared some, I want to show you some metrics that really could help you as developers to really make these data-driven decisions. So on the platform, just as a quick introduction, of course you can see let's say the health or the growth of the overall Ethereum scaling ecosystem, but then we have some fundamental metrics. We have block space usage where we label smart contracts, also with the Open Labels initiative that we kind of co-founded. And by doing that, we can categorize smart contracts, we can categorize projects, and you actually see, look, what can you as a user or as a builder decide on where to build and really where to deploy your smart contracts on, where to find your actual usage. And then we have a single chain analysis because you'll see that only one metric will not help you, right? Like many people look at, daily active addresses, but we'll see maybe in a bit that might be a skewed, might be a skewed metric actually, and can easily be gamed, let's say. And so how do certain metrics actually help you? And that's why I want to just show you like a couple of brief things where, look, that's the overall user base right now for the layer 2 ecosystem. So we don't have all the layer 2s that LGBeat has, but we have a selection, like the biggest TVL basically. There's only Metis missing right now. And basically you see like around these 17 layer 2s, like the growth is actually quite substantial since like 2022. So since basically like DEF CON, and kind of last week we actually hit a milestone, but then it went down quickly, right? And one of the reasons was that when we look at Arbitrum, for example, Arbitrum had all of a sudden like a spike in active addresses. So you see that when you kind of zoom in. And then that's why the whole layer 2 user base, of course, all of a sudden went up, for example. But actually going back, you see that the overall usage is quite like diversified, which is a nice sign, right? Because a lot of people always think in a way that it's competition, but actually that's kind of our story as well, growing the pie. That's how it started in a way, that all the different layer 2s right now can actually kind of position themselves in a different way. I mean, Vitalik also just talked about it in his latest blog post about the different subcultures. So that's why it's a nice thing to see that there's different layer 2s focusing on different things. And when you actually go then to the block space usage, so as I said, like we also, one thing, no. So when you go to the chain overview, so there's a couple of different layer 2s, and then you clearly see, look, what's going on these different layer 2s. So if you, for example, talking a lot about NFTs, then you will clearly see, look, Sora is actually now the chain to go, right? We all know, like Ethereum itself, mainnet has been the go-to chain for NFTs, but now since the scaling like roadmap is playing out, it's actually now showing, look, Sora is one of the key chains to be on as an NFT artist, for example, so with your project. So you can make that informed decision, for example, or of course as an end user to go and see, okay, what's happening. And of course, when you, like, speaking about DeFi, then you can go down and see different like projects that are actually running on the different chains, like in this case, Arbitrum. And that, as a developer, if you look at this data and say, look, there's already an audience, and I might want to tap into that audience, or actually there's too much competition, I might want to avoid it through different metrics. You can actually make these more informed decisions, especially if you're also looking for outside capital, for example. And then you have the actual data. A nice thing about, and like coming to an end here soon, was also, so the recent metric that we introduced was so-called throughput. So because like a lot of different data platforms, they said, look, we're looking at the transactions per second, but it's hard to compare with different tech behind it. It's hard to compare actually the different chains with transactions per second. And now, we see there was a flat line for Base, for example, and Base just introduced like an upgrade to their chain, and now they're allowing for more throughput. So they always have to test, because like otherwise that chain might fail, and we know that from other chains, I think, that they quickly fail. And so here we see that actually now Base has still a higher throughput, but for example, the active addresses are actually going down, which first of all, you would think like doesn't make sense, right? Because like if you have a higher throughput, actually there should be more active people. But that just is an indication there might be more complex applications now running on Base, not just like simple swaps or like simple transfers. So which is quite interesting. And you see clearly that when we literally look at the throughput again, so that's the actual metric. You see there's a lot of things really flat. So you see optimism is always at maximum capacity, basically. And that also means, we had it in the talk before, that also decides on how much you're actually paying on a different layer 2. So if you as a developer then are developing, let's say, an application where you need cheap fees, then you actually should look at kind of chains that really have the ability to have a higher throughput, and which is interestingly also linear, for example, by consensus, by MetaMask. So they actually have a peak throughput right now of 10 megagas, which is like one of the highest right now that we have out there. So, and they, as you see, they're actually not at all at capacity at the moment, but Base is actually already again reaching capacity, but they are on the way of like upgrading the chain along the way to 1 gigagas. So we have mega right now, and they actually want to reach 1 gigagas. So that's just one example, and then of course that all affects the fees, and which you as a developer can also compare. Maybe as a last note, this heat map, for example, might also be interesting to you. We already always saw like an outlier with optimism, and when you look at the heat map, like when is it expensive to kind of do something on different chains? It's actually interesting because most of the time during Asian trading hours, for example, optimism is very expensive, because there's a lot of perpetual like apps like being used on optimism during these times. So that's when you as a developer or as an end user also know, look, I should actually avoid optimism around that time, because I unnecessarily pay more gas than needed, right? So yeah, I think that was a brief intro in different metrics that you could look at, and I hope that makes sense to you. And yeah, thank you. You can follow us. That's it.
Thank you so much. I realized we met at the Linear booth takeover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Denver, yeah.
In Denver.
Exactly.
I'm
That's
a huge fan of Grow the Pie, by the way. I think, yeah.
you.
Anyway, huge fan. Question. I wanted to. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to know whether you think, I like the thing about how you said it's distributed, the weekly, like the transactions and other things. But I was wondering if in the future you think the power law will kick in even for L2s, or will it continue to be distributed going ahead?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think like there's not going to be like endless amount of different layer 2s. I think we're going to see individual stacks. I think that's what we already, because that's why we're looking at already having a new metric that says, look, the actual stack accumulated. So when we then look at Arbitrum, when we look at Optimism, when we look at Polygon, and so on, and CK Sync, obviously. And I think there it's going to be interesting, of course, how the distribution is going to be. But there's going to be a lot of purpose-built layer 2s, which is also like a challenge for us, because right now we have 17. And of course, we don't want to like swamp the platform with like 100 different layer 2s, which is then very, very complicated, obviously. Of course, we're kind of doing that in the end, but it's probably going to be more app-specific chains, which also makes sense for different use cases, let's say. But of course, I think it's going to be individual stacks that are just providing the tech, and like the super chain. When you then upgrade, then every other layer 2 basically gets this upgrade as well. Yeah.
I think there was a question here. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. Also a big fan of your site. When it comes to the category comparison, I see that Base has actually the highest percentage of unlabeled contracts. Is that related to the fact that also the unique users are going down? There's more unique contracts that aren't labeled yet, or? No,
actually not. It's actually a sign that the ecosystem is healthy, because we are too slow to actually label.
Okay. All right. Yeah. It seems like a good sign, actually.
That's the actual reason. And that's why we actually also founded the Open Labels Initiative, because our long-term goal was to not label or do the labeling ourselves, but to kind of outsource that to the community and kind of have, basically it could open up a retroactive funding for them as well. So if individual users can then kind of label more in a trusted and verified way, so that we always kind of get down to almost, let's say, 0% unlabeled tags, exactly.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then one more question about the categories. Blast, I don't see a breakdown of their categories. Am I missing something? Yeah. Yeah, because like for some chains we don't have that yet, because it's quite, for some ecosystems it's more complicated to actually get the block space data. But yeah, that will come over time. Okay, thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks.
All right, one last question. I actually have one. I used to lead business development at MetaMask, right? Like for end users, they actually don't look at chains. They only look at dApps. Do you guys have plan to like obfuscate the chains and just highlight more of the dApps? I know you already do a little bit. Yeah, so basically we already also got an Optimism grant to say we look more at the applications, because we're totally public goods funded, by the way, so that's why it's free for everyone always to use. And so we're going to have a more application view, so where like the layer 2s are a bit kind of hidden behind the applications, because that's what we need as well to kind of make it easier to understand, right? Yeah, cool. And also, I'm launching a layer 2 as well, so to make your life harder. Anyway, thank you guys. Our next speaker rescheduled, so we'll have 30 minutes break. Thank you.